Welcome to On Par. Today I'm joined by Clint Willson, the director of the LSU Center for River Studies and professor of civil and environmental engineering. He is also a fellow of LSU's Coastal Studies Institute. His research is centered around something vitally important to the state, the Mississippi River Delta. We're going to tee off with a couple questions. You ready?
I'm ready.
Good deal. Where are you from? And how did you become interested in engineering rivers and the coast?
Well, I was born in Pittsburgh. So I was born.
There's a river there.
There is. As a matter of fact, and I was born about a mile from the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers that form the Ohio. And so really from that, my grandparents lived near one of two of those rivers, spent a lot of time along the banks of those rivers, moved about an hour north from there and, all lake within a small college town, just interested in water. Went on to Penn State, got my undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering after starting in biochemistry. So I'd done biochemistry for a couple of years, but really found my passion or interest was more aerospace. And fast forward after about 7 years in the Marine Corps, decided what was I going to do next? And I'm like, let's combine this kind of chemistry biology with how fluids flow. And so went got my master's and PhD in really environmental fluid mechanics, environmental engineering, and civil engineering. So I've always been interested, I guess, in how fluid flows and how it transports things, whether it's chemicals, whether it's nutrients, whether it's sediment. How do fluids move things? And so, here at LSU, and I had the opportunity to get started with a small physical model located on River Road, just north of the vet school, about 20 years ago. Just kind of testing out our capabilities and whether we could really contribute to the science of understanding how sediment moves down the river. And 20 years later, we end up with the Center for River Studies.
You started this journey in Pennsylvania, continued to matriculate in academic programs there. Then I understand you made your way to Texas.
Yes, right.
How'd you get to Louisiana?
My wife's from Pensacola. And so as I was finishing up my postdoc and looking for faculty jobs, this is back when we had maps, right? She put a pin in Pensacola, put a string about 6, that represented 6 hours, and said, there you go. Look for a job within that half circle.
No pressure with that.
No pressure at all, no. So I interviewed a couple places, right? And LSU offered me a faculty position in civil environmental engineering. But really at the end of the day, it was the opportunity to do research, world-class engineering department, college, the opportunities here, somebody who's interested in environmental and water issues, Louisiana has them in spades. And so, can make multiple careers and, 24 and a half years later, we're still here.
So after 24 and a half years in your time at LSU, and by the way, thank your wife for making that circle and your landing here. That's big time. What are you most proud of?
I think it's really the connections with the students and the students that have studied, probably mostly master's and PhD students, but even the undergraduate students. I think it's the connections we made, watching them in their path, in consulting or for agencies or at universities, right? Doing research or designing and constructing projects around the country, if not really around in different parts of the world. And to me, that's the most rewarding part in it, right? Is that seeing them be so successful. You get a note from some former student that's doing this really cool project in the Southwest United States or up in the Pacific Northwest, or they're down on the coast, doing a coastal restoration project, and sending pictures, and you just get that feeling of this is really cool, and you made a difference.
Well, I have to say this before I ask you another question. After visiting, and I think there were some master's students in the coastal engineering program, I had great regrets about my major. It was that special. I wish I had the chance to do what they were doing. That was special. So the coast is an important part of our Scholarship First agenda. What are you and your team working on? What are the big problems that you're trying to better understand and potentially offer solutions for?
I think the first thing to recognize is the power and the influence of the Mississippi River on building, so much of the South Central and Southeast Louisiana coast, and then its past and current importance in terms of the economy, right? And for sustaining industry, communities along the river, and as that major transportation, highway that connects so much of the Midwest of the United States to not just other parts of the United States, but really the world. we think about that, and then we also realize, the over-engineering or attempts over the last 70, 100, 150 years to control the river have really created a coastal crisis here in Louisiana with, 2,000 square miles of land loss over the last 80 years and projected that to continue because we've disconnected that powerful Mississippi River, its water, its sediment, its nutrients, from the lands that it built over the last several thousand years. And so what we're trying to do at the Center for River Studies is help the state, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, better understand how that water and sediment moves down the river so that they can utilize that. They can better design, better plan, better optimize their coastal restoration projects, in particular river sediment diversions.
What impact do you think the center has had on the state and even beyond the state, other Gulf regions, parts of the Gulf region, the world even? How would you characterize the impact?
I think we're doing some really novel science with that physical model, with the type of model we have, with the type of sediment we have. The other part, though, is the education and outreach. In the 2 years before COVID, we had about 15,000 visitors. And those visitors went from, middle school and high school students to state legislators, to senators and Congress people from around the country, to several presidential cabinet level people. And so the ability to bring people in there and talk about talk about how our coast formed, how it's different from Virginia or Hawaii or from California, I think is critical to people understanding really what the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority is trying to do to maintain and restore our coast. So you start with that. Then you talk about how we got to this situation, how our engineering decisions, and which were, needed because we needed to protect industries and communities along the river, right? We need to maintain navigation. So those were necessary, but the consequences of those decisions, right, are leading to significant land loss, habitat loss, migratory birds, fisheries, critical, important to the United States fishing industry, as well as navigation, et cetera. So helping people understand that it's not just a Louisiana crisis, right, is important because, and that the Mississippi River and our coast supports so many different industries. And then transitioning to the work the state is doing. This comprehensive coastal master plan is unlike, there are people from across the country or some around the world looking at Louisiana to say, how do we get a science and engineering-based plan that is based on solid science, solid understanding? A lot of that science was done here at LSU. So being able to bring people in, right, and talk about how how the system formed, how we got to where we are, and how the science and engineering is being used to plan, design, and construct projects that will have real ecosystem benefits, I think is very rewarding. And we can do that to, like I said, middle schoolers. We can do it to, cabinet officials and scientists around the world.
So you mentioned the river model. Help us understand what the river model is and how it's being used.
We call it a movable bed physical model. And what that means is, it's a representation of the lower 190 miles of the river. It is scaled to the elevations, the distances are all scaled down to fit basically in about a 120 by 90 foot platform. And we've got got the levees in there. You can even see roads on there, as you probably saw when you were out there. We've got the river bathymetry in there. But one of the key differences between this and a number of other models is that we use these lightweight sediment particles that we can inject into the model itself with the water that's flowing in our model river. And those sediment particles, their density and their sizes, are designed and were manufactured so that they move down our model river the way sand moves down the actual Mississippi River. And so what we're able to do with the physical model is we're able to reproduce what's happening in the real Mississippi River in terms of the flows in the river, the water levels in the river, and the way sand moves down the river in a very controlled way, and in obviously much faster than it happens in the real world, right? We can do 1 year on the Mississippi River in about 1 hour on the physical model.
Well, how many years of the Mississippi River can you run on the model?
Well, we typically run about 50 years at a time. So the state's coastal master plan looks at 50 years into the future. So the different experiments we've run are typically over a 50-year future scenario. whether it's different flows coming down the river, it's different sea level rise scenarios, it's different amounts of sediment that are coming down, it's with river sediment diversions or without river sediment diversions. Overall, we've run probably the equivalent of about 1,000 years of Mississippi River time, just typically in like 50-year, chunks.
So what are you looking for if I were sitting there with you, bird's eye view? What do you want to come to understand when you run the model? What do you want to be able to help people see and understand?
Yeah, what we're really looking at with our instrumentation, a lot of the measurements that students make, is how that sand is moving down the river on a month to month and year to year, so that the state understands, okay, if we have a river, they're actually getting ready to start construction on a river sediment diversion, which is going to be the largest ecosystem restoration project that's ever been built in this country. But to really optimize the use of that diversion, they want to know how much sand is available in that couple miles just upriver of the diversion. So that when they open the diversion, they're maximizing the amount of sand they get out into the estuary, into Barataria Bay, because they want to maximize the amount of sediment that gets out there to build more land. So what we're really looking for, and what we would be looking for if we were out there, right, would be how that black material, that sand, is moving down the river kind of month to month, year to year. And when you open up the river sediment diversion, or you're thinking about opening it up, is there a decent amount of sediment sitting a couple miles upriver, so that when you open the diversion, that sediment moves down and through the diversion out into the wetland?
I'm curious, are there any other models like this? Is anybody else doing it the way we do it here at LSU?
No, it's a very unique model. It's unique in terms of, I think, the scale and the domain. We're covering 190 miles of the river. It's equivalent of about 12,000 square miles in the real world, right? We're using, it's highly distorted in terms of exaggerating certain scales. But we spent a lot of time, theoretically and numerically and with a bunch of calculations saying, even though we do this and we can fit a 190-foot long river in this space, and we can do that, we can represent the important physics in the river doing this. And at the same time, we can also come up with this really kind of innovative way to use lightweight sediment, these lightweight plastic particles, so that they move down our model river the way sand moves down the actual Mississippi River. So, there are others who, have river models, but everyone's kind of unique in a sense. But this one is very innovative, I think, in terms of the way it was constructed. This isn't a one-year project. We're going to continue to do experiments for the next several years using this model. So it was constructed to last. It's constructed to do long-term experiments, these 50-year experiments. And so, we're really proud of the work that, really even the design team, the advisory team, the science advisory team from people all over the country really came together to say, this is going to work, this is how we think it should, be designed and operated. And then they're like, yes, this is the way we think it should work. And then it works.
Well, you're distinctive in another way. You have a partnership with a state agency, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. What does that mean, for those of us who are watching? Why is that important that our research group like yours is in partnership with the state in this way?
As the flagship University of Louisiana, it's, I think it's a great way and a great partnership to demonstrate the impactful work we're having for the state of Louisiana. So I think that's the first one. I think the second is, the opportunity. Look, their building is 15 feet from ours. And so the opportunity day to day to work with the engineers, to work with their scientists, to have them bring over visitors, whether it's state legislators, or it could be engineers or scientists from different parts of the country, the Corps of Engineers, or even internationally, right? To have them come over and to interact with me, but more importantly, the students, right? To talk about the work we're doing. I think it's really critical. And then, the kind of third piece of that is the work we're doing, the research, the data we're collecting, the results that we're providing to the CPRA, is going into their coastal master plan, and they're planning for how are they going to operate, manage and operate these river diversions into the future. Then think about, okay, what else can we do now, right? Because like I said, they're in the design, and one of the river sediment diversions is going to construction soon. So then it's like, okay, now we've got these two that are going to be in place. What's next? What else can we do with the river? Because the river built a lot of our coast. We should use it to its maximum.
Right. So, as a personal note, I lived 18 years on the Mississippi River, a little further north in the St. Louis part of it. And now almost 2 years here in Baton Rouge. And it's just an amazing waterway. What would you want a Louisiana resident to know and understand about this unbelievable waterway?
How it really built so much of our coast. And you know, if you go to New Orleans today, realize that land was not there several thousand years ago. That was open water. And so it's the river that built that land. And the importance of the river for our economy. You know, I think we understand, you know, people look and see ships going up and down the river, but they don't always, I think, have an appreciation for how much each of those ships is, quote, worth in terms of what they're carrying. I think we got some of that acknowledgement this fall with the Low River, right? And hearing the impacts of the agricultural community, right? But to really understand how much how important the river is for our trade. We've got a Class 1 railroad that comes right next to the center. We've got Interstate 10, which connects the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. And then you've got the Mississippi River. And so really for people to understand that the river from a transportation standpoint of goods and products is just as important as those trains that go by or the tractor trailers that are on I-10.
That's beautiful. I try to tell people with second largest distribution system in this country, the economy of the United States depends on that river and you and your colleagues. So that leads me to another question. How do you inspire students to want to pursue a career in coastal engineering and perhaps using the Louisiana water economy as a driver? How do you sell this?
Honestly, it's pretty easy sell in a lot of cases. And I think it's because I think first off, students that grew up in Louisiana, I think a lot of them have the appreciation. Their parents, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents, whatever, have spent a lot of time on the coast. They go to their camps to fish or to duck hunt or whatever, right? So the students, even at the age of 16, 17, 18, have already seen changes in their lifetime. It's not one of these things where you have to say, oh, back in 1920, this looked like this. It's more like back in 2012, it looked like that, and now it looks like this. It's so easy to gush, and I use the word gush. It's so easy to talk to prospective students about the opportunities here at LSU. You know, they're interested in the environment or coastal or water. And they know Louisiana, okay, they're like, okay, I know they have a lot of issues, right, that they're trying to deal with. But once we get started on talking about the different programs, whether it's coastal and ecological engineering, civil engineering, oceanography, coastal science, geology, geophysics, all these, right? You start looking at the different programs, then you start telling them about the faculty that are there and the number of courses that they can take. I'm like, hey, you want to learn more about the coastal geology of Louisiana, go take deltaic geology with Sam Bentley or Carol Wilson. You want to learn about how water flows in these kind of estuaries, go take a class from Matt Hyatt or Chun-Yun Lee. You want to learn about how the ecology of the system, go take a class from John White or Robert Twilley. And so the students, they're like, wait, you have all of these people there. You have all these opportunities. I said, yeah, and most of them, all of them are going to get you in the field during the semester. So it's not going to be just a bunch of equations. It's not going to be, oh, let's watch these videos or solve these, run these computer programs. Like I said, it's somewhat an easy sell, I think, because people recognize the LSU name. And I think as soon as you open their eyes a little bit or, let them see all the different opportunities they're going to have when they come here, it's really not tough. And so we've got students from Wyoming, Michigan, Massachusetts, Arkansas, Mississippi, Florida that want to come here and study. And so far, we've been pretty lucky that most stay in the state then to continue working.
Well, I've got a different kind of question. We're going to go to a little lighter, more fun. What's your most memorable experience from your work on the coast?
It's taking students out, whether it's research or as part of a class, for like the first time. You were out Wax Lake Delta,
yes,
right? And to take students out there and to say, look, we can take this boat, and you may not think there's much elevation change, but look at the different types of vegetation. Look at the different types of sediment, right? And That's what it looks like when we're building new land. And that's what we're trying to do here in the state is build or maintain land. And so, getting them to experience that and see it and to say, okay, let's walk this 100 meters or 200 meters. When I was faculty in residence, we would take honors college students after their freshman year who were part of the LaSalle program, right? The Louisiana Service and Leadership part of the honors college. We would take them to LumCon for 2.5 days. And we would get out in the boats. We'd go to Barrier Island. We'd go out in some of the newly created wetlands or even some of the ones that we were losing pretty rapidly. And to get out of the boat there with students who were from Mass Comm, English, sociology, engineering, coast environmental science, and to listen to them talk about what they see or what they experience. As an engineer, I kind of go out there and I look at certain things and I experience it a certain way. But to see students, from different disciplines and different interests, how do they view it? How do they experience that? And that's really something that to me that's been, very powerful is to experience that and then learn from that so you can think about better ways to communicate.
Well, Professor Willson, after listening to you, having personally visited the center, I can say I'm definitely sad I didn't major in coastal engineering or some science of that sort, but I'm more excited about the fact that you're here and you created a context so that young people and some who might be more mature can jump right in and engage with the kind of work you're doing, because it's not only exciting from a science point of view, from my perspective, it's foundational to how we're going to secure and protect the people here in the state. And so I really thank you for what you're doing at the center and your work as a scholar here, an engineer.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.